There are many people nowadays who simply wonder and they ask themselves, are video games that bad? I see posts with people proclaiming that the violence in video games is, you know, not good for children and such. But this whole society in its sickness is not good for children. I doubt the small distraction of a video game would be that harmful. Because a video game, as of what I see, is, well, nothing else than kind of a tool, right? Everything in this world happens to be more or less a tool. Usually these tools end up being used because, well, most of us have traumas and we want to bypass them. We want to run away from them. The point is this a bad thing? Well, running away from traumas is one way of dealing with it. Obviously, on the scale of awareness, it is a first step because when you embrace your pain, well, you're apparently or, well, willingly oblivious to those. You're not knowledgeable of your traumas because you've been raised in a toxic environment, and most likely you don't know what's been happening, and everything that's been going on you've seen as the natural and the normal, so you wouldn't simply doubt it, and most likely you've ignored your well, inner voice for so long that simply there is apparently no more guidance, right? It feels like there's no more intuition, there's nothing, and the pain you've gone through, well, that's the normal. That is basically the first step of ignorance and the first level of, awareness. Now, when it comes to running away from pain, well, that's a certain level of upgrade in your awareness, because when you run away from pain, at least you're aware that there is some pain, right? You've suffered enough to start putting the first, smallest questions. Now, there are people in this world that claim, video games are way too violent. But I do remember that one of the purposes they were made for, well, they were made to, allow you to experience whatever you can't experience in this reality, you know, without any repercussions. Because in a video game, you theoretically can kill anyone, you can do literally everything without any, real consequences. Because, well, there may be consequences in the game based on its functions, but ultimately, the point is very simple. There is no outside, you know, circumstance, right, that will, uh, you know, pull you to some sort of justice, right? So the point about video games is, well, most of the people nowadays, especially the young ones, they lack heroes, right? I do remember in my youth that I was read some stories, the stories were about princes who would always save the princess. Now, these stories were made not because girls would be useless or defenseless in this world. It was made because, a true man would do a lot of things for a woman. At the same time, stories can also be said about women who actually did whatever they could to save their beloved men, because the woman is also capable of doing the same, right? She is also capable of doing the such. Now, when it comes to life and when it comes to ideas, when you live in a society where there are no heroes, but apparently there are only villains, well, what's the point in living in such a society? Because when there is nothing else than corruption, when there is nothing else than hatred, when there is nothing else than futility, uselessness, the point is you will feel so, because that's technically the only thing surrounding you. So some people will accept it as normal. Some people will start questioning, right? Some people will fight against it. And some people will embrace it with wisdom. There are multiple levels. And, once you embrace something with wisdom and experience, you know how to tackle it without it shaping you or further affecting you, right? You have suffered enough, you have gained enough experience and awareness to simply no longer allow certain things or everything to simply shape you. Whatever angers you controls you, right? So when it comes to video games are nothing else than a tool. With people nowadays being more and more frustrated, and with the pandemic outside, so many parents simply don't realize the mental distress they are causing to their children. They're nothing else than futile beings who don't care much about them. So obviously, they won't care much about their children. In video games, well, many of them are made so simple that anyone can play them. Anyone can kill anything. And it's funny that video games actually portray the reality. I've played several games in my life, and I've usually been very loyal to those instead of, just um, follow, the story brainlessly, right? I've learned things about honor, about being chivalrous, things that my family and people around me didn't teach much about. And I followed their stories, but the point was, every time I would want to imagine myself in those stories, in those worlds, I knew that that world did not have any place for me, which felt a bit sad, but you see, the game is nothing else than a tool. How you make use of it? Well, it's the same thing as, for example, with any other tool. You can use a hammer to bang someone in the head and kill them. You can use a hammer to prepare something. Or you can simply leave it there. The choice is up to each and every one of us. The same is with games. The point is, when people are so frustrated, they will seek distractions. Because when you seek left and right and no one is capable of helping you, it is called, well, you reach a point which is called learned helplessness. If something happens to you and apparently there is no way out, you will simply give in. That's what happens to most people when they are put under pressure. Now, obviously, everyone has gone through situations, that were more grievous than others, harsher than other people. But the point about this is, video games, again, they are nothing else than a tool. If someone can't make a difference in between violence in a video game and violence in real life, well, that is a big problem of theirs, because most likely there were gonna be violence sooner or later. A video game is a good way to test people. It is a good way to see their potential, because there are a lot of simulator games, for example, that you can use. Now, if you learn the game by heart, you can easily, circumvent the AI and you can simply fool it to get better results of the game. But the point is not this. You can use that as an opportunity to see how people fare. Like, I don't know, you could have people play uh, city skylines, for example, and see in a certain number of hours how far they can get with the development of a city. Because sooner or later you may discover that the economy is not necessarily easy, but it can be circumvented if you learn a few tricks, or if you do a certain, well, I'm not perfect at the game, but every game has, those limits that once you know, you can simply bypass them and, use your human mind to outwit the AI. So when it comes to this, when it comes to this, you can at least see the potential of every human. You can see how good they can fare. Because that can be just like substances in the world. With different substances that you find, for example, in plants, you can make either medicine or you can make poison. The dose is basically the difference. Video games are the same. They are either medicine because, well, many people need heroes, they need a story, they need something to believe in. People are simply sick of believing in a god that sits on a golden throne and, they don't have anything else to do than simply watch you and whatever you're doing, and then they're gonna severely punish you for whatever you have done in this life, right? This is also something else that adds to the sensation of uselessness that people feel. So when it comes to such aspects, such ideas, it is good to understand that video games are a platform. They can be a distress call if someone is overspending time in video games or overplaying something. Well, again, they are a good means to see what some of the karma of people is. Some people overspend in games, some people, overplay them. They embrace toxic environments in video games. It's all about certain things. We've all gone through previous lifetimes, and there's been piles and piles of disrespect towards us, and hatred, and separation, and us being called that we're not good enough. So all these impulses, they will guide you towards certain environments. How you answer to those is a good way, to allow people to see what problems you may have, right? Not necessarily, let's not call them problems. When it comes to video games are a way to relax yourself. Unfortunately, many people end up being played by the game because, well, nowadays people are being seen as numbers. How many hours everyone spends, how many ads you can create in the game, how many things you can sell to people, how many whales you attract in your thing, right? Video games are a very good platform to study the society as it is. Because when you have things like YouTube and the such, in which players, streamers, but I call them players, and people who make content, they view their followers as numbers. That is a big problem. It's the same with video games. People play video games many times because, well, in most cases actually, people play video games because they want that, gratification that they never receive from their parents, from school. They just want to see those pixels on the screen arranged in such a way that they show them some gratification, right? You have achieved something in your life. Because people don't have heroes from birth. They don't have any sort of gratification. Many of them have stupid, useless parents who can't tell them several good things, right? They've probably never heard some bravo in their life, or, you've done well, right? And all these frustrations will tend to, be hidden, by the youngsters because they are also more vulnerable. They are still, up till the age of 25, it is said that the brain still develops. Around the mid-20s, the emotional side of the brain finalizes its development. So the point is, once it's done, well, you simply are more mature emotionally. But up till then, we can see that youngsters are very unpredictable. The point is, they will always seek distractions. That is why so many of them take drugs, they take their lives, they overspend in video games, they drink, because this is how society is. It's always been like this. Well, at least in the last century. If you're ill, all the gates open to you. But if you're healthy, that's almost illegal. That's almost illegal. Especially nowadays, apparently. It's good that people are waking up. So if a person can't make the difference in between, reality and a video game, most likely that person needs some treatment, mental, psychological treatment. Because someone who kills people in a video game is not a murderer. You're only a murderer in society until you have committed something like that and you are also proven guilty. Not when you are manufactured, right, papers to incriminate you for things that you haven't done. Right? Let's not forget that justice exists. Even if you're a murderer, you're only a murderer when society and the law manage to successfully incriminate you with evidence. So the point is, a video game is nothing else than a bunch of code that repeats. It reads some video files, some sound files, and then there is the code that is being run and the numerous processes that go in the background. What you see is images, what you hear are just sounds. The meaning is just in your head. That is why some people like certain games, they simply don't like certain games, or they simply just play them for what they are. All this being said, you are appreciated. Take care. Ferenc Board signing out.